client says they've got a great job for you, but should you accept the job? When you start getting your first clients, it's exciting and you'll be eager to work with just about anyone. But hold on a second, just because you've been asked to do a job doesn't mean you should dive in head first. When you're new to the freelance illustration world, you'll be excited to finally get real projects and some real experience. So you might be willing to take on pretty much anything that lands in your inbox. And in general, I think it's good to be open to any opportunities that you can find in the early days, because you'll learn so much faster working on real projects with real clients. However, that's not to say we shouldn't take the time to think things over and ask the right questions to make sure it's a good fit and that you're not being taken advantage of, or you'll end up regretting taking on a bad project. New illustrators are generally cheaper to work with and willing to work on anything that pays because they want the experience. So you're more likely to end up working with clients who don't respect your time, make endless changes to projects, pay badly or pay late, and might have unfair or more likely unclear terms on who owns what. I'm James, an illustration agent, and I help illustrators like you build their careers. And in this video, we're talking about the potential risks when taking on a new project. We'll also look at what the genuine opportunities might be. Then we'll talk about some practical considerations, like if you've got enough time to do the job, or if you've got the right skills for it, and getting on the same page with the client about what exactly they'll get when they hire you. We'll also talk about how to turn down a job in the right way, and a general framework you can use for evaluating any project. In fact, let's get into that first, because I know your time is valuable. Think about these 3 P's whenever you're considering taking on a project: price, pleasure, and promotion. And ideally, any job you take on will have at least 2 of these 3 P's. Does the job pay fairly, or does it pay really well? If so, that's great. That's what we're all looking for, right? But often the best paying jobs might not be the most interesting. And if a client is paying you a lot of money, they'll want a lot of say in the final outcome. That's where pleasure comes in. Are you going to enjoy working on the project? Sometimes you will, and sometimes you won't. And that's going to be broadly true for the whole of your career. Not every project is going to be exciting and fun. And finally, you've got to consider whether there are going to be some good promotional opportunities as a result of the project. If it's a big name client that you can add to your client list, or if the project is going to be shared very widely and lots of people are going to see your illustrations, that's going to be good for your credibility and will hopefully help you find work in the future. For example, if you're getting a good price for a job and you're going to enjoy working on it, it doesn't really matter if no one's ever going to see it. But if you'll enjoy working on a project and you'll get some great promotional opportunities from it, maybe you can afford to be more flexible on the price. And if you'll get great promotional opportunities from a project and you're going to be paid really well, it might be worth doing even if you won't enjoy it that much. This is a general basic framework you can keep in your back pocket and think about when you get a new inquiry from a client. But there's obviously a lot more to consider. So let's look at some of the potential risks of working with a new client. As I mentioned, new illustrators may attract more low-quality clients who don't have big budgets. And in my experience, the clients who are spending their own limited funds on a project, whether it's an independent author or someone who wants a logo for their small business, are the ones who can be most difficult to work with. A low budget does not mean an easy project. So let's start with the money. Does the budget the client has offered match the time and effort you'll have to spend on the project? If you've never had a paying client before, or you've got limited experience and a client offers you $500 to work on something, that might seem pretty good. But what if the project is going to take you 3 weeks? If it takes up all of your time and prevents you from working on other, potentially better paying jobs, it might not be worth it. It almost definitely means you'll be earning less than minimum wage if you're in the UK or the US, for example. If you're in a lower cost of living area of the world, it's probably going to be a bit more manageable, but that doesn't mean it's a fair fee for the amount of time you've got to put into it. So your first step might be to try and negotiate that fee, which can be quite intimidating. But if you're clear and upfront with your reasons and the client values your skills, they will hopefully be willing to discuss what is fair. Start by briefly explaining that the budget doesn't cover your time for such a long project, and then make a counter offer. Be clear and be professional. Just give them the facts. If they're not willing to budge, then you've got a decision to make. If you don't have any other projects lined up and you need the money, no one's going to blame you if you take the job at a low price. But be aware that it sets a precedent for future interactions with this client. They'll know that you're willing to accept a fee that's less than what the project is worth. It's too hot. Too hot. Being firm with clients about money is really difficult, especially if you genuinely need the work. Try to work out if the client simply won't negotiate the budget or if they can't. If it's an independent client spending their own money, maybe they do have an absolute limit on what they can afford to pay. But if you sense that they're lowballing you and they could pay you more if they just chose to, they just want a cheap option and they don't really value you. If the client can be flexible, then you should be too. If your counter offer was $800 and they say, can we make it work for $650, that's probably a good compromise. Let's also talk about risky clients. If you get a job offer from a well-established company or magazine or brand that you recognize and they seem legitimate, that's pretty low risk for you. They're probably not going to disappear without paying. 99% of the time, working with established clients like that is a pretty safe bet. Also, working through freelance platforms like Upwork or Fiverr, though not ideal for other reasons, they do have systems and safeguards in place so clients can't screw you over. But if you get an email from a person you've never heard of with a personal email address asking you to work on their own passion project or small business idea, there's a lot of potential risk there. You don't know this person. They could get the work from you and just disappear, never to be heard from again. And it happens. Not all of them are acting in bad faith, though. There are some genuine opportunities in working with independent clients who will respect you and value your work. So how do you sort out the bad ones from the good ones? I can't tell you the amount of emails I get from new illustrators who have worked with independent clients for a specific project, and then the client starts using the work for something else, and the illustrator feels like they've been tricked. Honestly, most of the time, it's not the client's fault. They simply don't know anything about copyright or licensing. And why would they? If they've just written a children's book and hired an illustrator, it's logical for them to assume that once they pay the illustrator, that they own the illustrations. It's our job to explain how things work and what the client will get and what they won't get and make the terms very clear. So you've got to know your stuff so you can guide clients and you can tell them what's fair and what's reasonable and what's expected. Luckily, that's what this channel is all about. So if you're not subscribed already, you know what to do. So here's some possible red flags that you can be on the lookout for. Being unwilling to negotiate on the price is one, which we've already talked about. Bad and inconsistent communication is another. If they take ages to get back to you or they don't answer your questions in the first few emails, they're probably going to be like that throughout the whole project, not to mention when you're waiting for payment and you can't get a reply from them. If they don't seem to know what they want and they can't give you a clear brief, that's a sign that the project is going to be really disorganized and will potentially mean that you're going to be making endless changes and dealing with a lot of unreasonable feedback. If they are unwilling to sign a contract or even a basic outline of the project that you've written that has the description of the project and the license terms, and they haven't given you an address or any contact details outside of their email, that's a red flag. A signed agreement is a legal commitment that some bad clients aren't willing to get on board with. Can you find them online? Do they have a website or a LinkedIn profile or anything like that? Not necessarily a red flag in itself, because not everybody does, but you want to be able to do a bit of a background check on a new client to make sure they are who they say they are. Generally speaking, if you're working with an independent client who you think could potentially be risky, ask for a significant part of the payment to be made upfront, 50% if you can get it. That reduces your risk. It shows that they're committed and it starts the project off on the right foot. Be aware though, that from their point of view, you might seem like a risk too. You could potentially take that 50% and disappear. So have a discussion about it, explain that a deposit means you share the risk, and be willing to offer contact details and other things that can put their mind at ease about sending you money. All the things that you want to know from them, you should be willing to offer yourself. If they're not willing to pay anything up front, or they disappear after you send them a contract, you've saved yourself a big headache. It's not a foolproof system. There are going to be situations where you build up some trust with a client and you think things are going well, and then, for whatever reason, things change and they disappear and they go quiet on you. So try to protect yourself when you can. You don't need to be paranoid, but you should always think about lowering the risk of your project. Now we've looked at the negatives, let's explore the positives and look for good opportunities. Getting paid to be an illustrator, especially when you're just starting out, is very rewarding. You're making money doing what you love, and you've got some confirmation that what you've been working towards all these years is starting to pay off. As long as you're being paid fairly, it's a positive. So let's just put that in the positives column. You're also beginning to get real industry experience. You're moving out of the student or practice stage and into real professional illustration. So what experience are you actually getting? Well, learning how to communicate and collaborate with clients is an important skill. You'll also have to work under a certain amount of pressure, which you may not have done outside of whatever time limits you give yourself or deadlines your teachers have given you. So you'll be able to practice your time management skills. You'll no doubt be getting feedback on whatever you deliver, and you'll have to negotiate that and learn to compromise on your vision of the project for the sake of what the client wants. This is all great practice and experience. Some experience might not be positive in itself, but becoming a more experienced illustrator is important because it feeds into the growth of your career. Some clients are going to offer you more opportunity to advance your career than others, but if you find the right project, it could open up a lot of opportunities for you in the future. And if your work is good, your portfolio is going to improve. If you have an idea of what your long-term plan is for your career, you can consider how a new project fits into that plan. If the project is with a brand you like, or you'll be working with other great creatives, or you'll be working on a really creatively challenging and satisfying project, that's great. It's not just about the immediate paycheck, it's also about the long-term benefits. On the other hand, if a client you don't really care about is asking you to work in a style that's not really what you do, and you won't get much out of the job other than money, maybe you'll decide to turn it down. That's fine too, if it's not going to help you move your career forward. And don't forget fun too. If you're genuinely interested in a project and you really like the client, or you'll get to try out some new techniques, even if the pay isn't that good, why not work on it? Some projects are fun and some aren't. If you can get more fun projects in your life, that sounds like a positive to me. And if the project is going to mean you have lots of great new work to share in your portfolio, that's going to look really good to future potential clients, because they'll see that you've been able to work on a project successfully with another client. That gives you credibility and social proof. New clients will trust you more easily if they can see you've done great work for other clients. There are a lot of opportunities for a new illustrator. They won't all be paid really well, but there are plenty of other positives to gain from saying yes to all kinds of different opportunities that you might come across. And as long as you're protecting yourself from risk and making informed decisions, go for it. Next, let's dive into some practical considerations to keep in mind. If you don't have time to take on a project for a client and do a good job, don't take it on. If you can't meet their deadline, or the end result will be rushed and not your usual quality of work, that's not going to benefit anybody. The client gets a second-rate piece of work, or a decent piece of work but it misses the deadline, and you risk harming your reputation, which you're still trying to build up. You can always ask for extra time if you need it, but do it at the start of a project, not on the deadline day. If you're clear about your availability and your schedule, often a client can allow some extra time, but they need to know early, not when they're trying to send a magazine off to print and they're waiting for your illustration to be delivered. If they've given you a chance as a new illustrator, not being honest about your time commitments can blow the whole thing, and it'll mean they'll be unlikely to hire you in the future. So if you don't have the time and you tell them that, and you tell them that you'd love to work with them in the future, they'll respect that and they'll appreciate your honesty because you're not messing them around. You're still building trust and building a relationship, even if you're not actually doing the job. Similarly, if you don't have the necessary skills to do what the brief requires, you probably shouldn't be winging it. It's good to take on a challenging project where you're going to have to stretch your skills. But if you can't do a certain thing that needs doing, don't be tempted to say you can do it, because you'll probably end up delivering something that's not good enough. And again, you might damage whatever trust the client has in you. Be honest. If you say, I can't do this thing, whatever it is, but then you offer an alternative approach, something you can do, the client will appreciate your honesty. And if it's possible, they may even consider whatever you're proposing. Let's talk about communication too. Effective communication is essential to any successful project. Make sure you and your client are on the same page regarding the scope of work. Deadlines and expectations, misunderstandings can lead to frustration and disagreement. So clarify all the project details up front, including what the client needs exactly, how many revisions are included, what happens if the project gets cancelled halfway through, how much are they paying you and when, what rights will the client have in the illustrations when they pay you, do they know that you'll be the copyright holder, what can they use the work for and what can't they use it for, how will you be credited as the illustrator. This could be a long video in itself. In fact, I do have other videos that go through all of these things, so go check them out. And I would encourage you to read everything you can from the Association of Illustrators, because they have posts and resources and workshops and courses that will really clarify all this for you. Knowledge is power when it comes to protecting your work, and the AOI has 50 years worth of industry knowledge to share with you. So next, let's talk about how to say no professionally and keep the door open for future opportunities. Even if a project doesn't seem like the right fit for you, it's important to handle the situation like a professional. The way you turn down a job can leave a lasting impression on a client and impact whether they consider hiring you for the next project, which might be a perfect fit for you. If you need to turn down a job, be polite and gracious. Thank the client for considering you and express your appreciation for the opportunity. You can use a standard response like, "Thank you for considering me for this project. Unfortunately, I'll have to say no at this time due to your reason. I appreciate your understanding and I hope we can work together in the future." Being courteous shows that you respect the client and their project, even if you're unable to take it on. This leaves a positive impression and maintains a professional relationship. When you turn down a job, it's a good idea to keep the possibility of future work open. You can say something like, "I'm currently booked, but I would love to collaborate on something in the future. Please keep me in mind next time." Saying something like that ensures that the client knows that you're interested in working with them in a more general sense, even if the current project isn't a good fit. It keeps the lines of communication open for potential future collaborations. And if you've turned a project down, but expressed interest in future work, make a note to yourself to follow up with that client later. Check in after a couple of months to see if they have any new opportunities. And that shows initiative and keeps you on their radar. Maybe you find yourself in a position where you can't do the job, but you know somebody who could be a good fit. Referring another illustrator potentially makes the client's life easier, so you win points for that. And the other illustrator is going to be very happy too. Win, win, win. As long as they do a good job. Don't recommend anyone you don't trust. So to recap, consider the 3 Ps: price, pleasure, and promotion. And make sure any new project you take on has at least 2 of them. Make sure you're being paid fairly for your work, because a low-paying client does not necessarily mean the project will be straightforward. Look out for red flags with clients and reduce your risk whenever you can by asking for some payment up front and getting a signed agreement of the project details. Be clear about what the client can expect from hiring you, what they can and can't do with the illustrations, the revisions included, and the price and the payment terms. If you're satisfied that the client is trustworthy, take all the opportunities you can get and build up your experience and your portfolio and your career. Don't take on a project if you know you're not going to be able to deliver great work, because it might do more harm than good. If you turn down a project, be polite and be professional. And if the client is worth keeping in touch with, keep the door open for future collaborations and follow up with them. Be clear, be nice, have fun, challenge yourself, and try new things. If you found this video helpful, please leave me a comment and share it with someone else who might like it. Your comments and questions keep me motivated to carry on putting out these videos. So let me know what you think, and I'll see you next time.